Sometimes numbers alone don't tell the whole story. Today, I want to show you something new that will change the way you look at your data. Hi, I'm Alexis from the Akenza team, and in this video I'm going to show you what you can do with our new image component. With the image component, you can add any visual to your dashboard and pin live data directly on it. By putting data directly onto images, it could be a floor plan, it could be a piece of equipment, you give context to this data and make it easier to understand for someone who's looking at your dashboard. So let's look at some examples of how you can use this image component into your dashboard. Here I have a dashboard from an industrial setting with a specific production line, and I added an image component at the bottom. As you can see, I added some point of interest on top of the picture. So these elements represent sensors that can be placed in this use case or additional piece of data information that we want to show in this image. And we provide various ways of displaying this data. Let's look at another example. Here I have a dashboard that focuses on one piece of equipment where I added a few KPIs on top, a chart for energy consumption, and I added an image component to give more context to the case, where I added as well some points of interest where you can see this front door, slide door, operating hours that correspond to some critical data that I want to know about this asset. But the use cases are not limited to the use of simple images. In this example, I uploaded a 2D floor plan of an office where we show occupancy data for the different meeting rooms and desks that are present in this office. And again, here we could display the data of these sensors in different ways. Here I opted for simple dots, but we'll see other examples afterward. So you start to see how flexible that image component is and how it can support different use cases. It's great to display data directly on the image component itself, but you can also use it as a single static picture, again, to give more context to your dashboard. So here we added the picture of a building, but you can also add pictures of the sensors that you use in the project. Really, there's no limitation in terms of what you can do. So you can use pixel images such as JPG and PNGs with your image component, but you can also upload SVG files, and that opens the door for new possibilities. Let's take a look at how to use SVG files with the image component. So the goal of my project is going to monitor this beautiful truck. So what I need to do first is prepare the SVG file. For this, I created two layers. First, you have the base layer that displays the truck itself, and then I have a layer which contains all the different assets that I want to monitor in this truck. So for example, I have defined the location of the fuel tank and the load of this truck that I would like to monitor afterwards in my dashboard. Once that's ready, I can generate the SVG file. For that, I'm using Inkscape, but you can also use Adobe Illustrator or any program that allows you to create these SVG files. And we're going to upload this file on our dashboard. Okay, so I'm going to start with a blank new dashboard. And now you can start add your KPIs, your chart, and obviously your image component. So let's add component and pick image. Let's give a name to my image component. And as you can see at the bottom, you have the possibility of uploading an SVG or a PNG JPG image. Let's pick the SVG option. The SVG file has been uploaded, and I need to select the layers that I want to display on my image component. So I'll make sure I select the base as well. And that's a good starting point. So now that I have my SVG that is uploaded, I will specify the layers that I want to color. For this, I go on layers, add a layer. I will select the asset layer in my SVG file that I want to color. And now I need to instruct the dashboard builder on how to map the objects in my SVG file with the assets in my workspace in Akenza. So for that, I have different ways. One possibility is to use the device ID, the Akenza ID. I can also work with custom properties, and they would be added here. But out of simplicity, I will use the device name here. And for that, I had to give the same name in the SVG file and in the asset inventory in Akenza. So if we look at my SVG file, I have those different objects, and they have the same name as the asset in my workspace in Akenza. As you can see here in my asset inventory, I have different devices that I created with our device simulator, and these have the same name as the objects in my SVG file. So now I can simply select device name and it will do the mapping automatically. And now we see the different areas that I want to color that have been identified. And I can select the data point that I want to map with these areas. So for example, here I can go and select an occupied Boolean data point, and that's an easy way to represent if there's an error in the system. Just doing that for the example. I'm going to save my component. So now I define only one layer for all the objects, but you could do that several times for the different objects of your truck. And if I go back to my workspace and I select my fuel tank, so I decided to use the occupied data point for this example. Here we see it's at false. If I want to change these and simulate a change in real time, we'll go on manual input and change the occupancy to occupied here. If I send the data now, so as I refresh the data, you can see how the status here changes as well. And what is interesting is that you can combine this coloring of the SVG file with points of interest. So if I edit again my image component and go over POIs, I can add several points of interest on the SVG file. So let's say that I want to know the temperature in my load because I added a sensor in the truck. So I'll just pick load and temperature. Directly, I have one of these small dots which specifies the temperature in my truck depending on the temperature range and the coloring that I picked. Like before, you have these 1, 2, 3 stops possibilities always. That's quite useful in some cases. We saw this example already with the desk and meeting room occupancy case, but you also have, for example, the possibility of adding more information into these dots. So here I can change, for example, the icon, pick temperature, something like that, sensor 1. And just like that, I can combine the POEs with the coloring that we've seen before. I also have label as a market type, which is a bit smaller, a bit different. You can decide, for example, to not display the POI name, just a value. And just like that, you can very easily add additional information on your SVG file. Here again, engine, temperature. If that's of interest, could very easily have that. Apply. So here we have an example of the SVG file coloring with the points of interest. So with this example, I just wanted to show you an example of what you can do with the image component, but obviously you can build more complex things and pair that with KPIs, charts, and other elements from the dashboard builder, as we've seen previously. So we're looking forward to seeing what you're going to do with this image component. That's it for today, and I see you in the next video.